One of the things I think that's pretty interesting is you look all around and you start seeing people pop up with podcasts here, podcasts there, podcasts everywhere. But the thing is, people are still dropping the ball when it comes to releasing a podcast the right way. All right. So in this episode, I'm going to show you the best way to release a podcast or the best way to launch your podcast in 2022. Let's get into the intro. Welcome to the Your Podcast Mentor Show with Jonathan Jones. Here you will learn how to start, launch, and monetize your podcast. In addition to hearing the latest trends and the latest and greatest things happening in the podcast industry. Are you ready? What's going on, family? I'm your host, Jonathan Jones, and I'm your podcast mentor. And you are currently listening to the Your Podcast Mentor Show. Okay. And today we're going to dive in and I'm going to pull the cover back and I'm going to show you how to start a podcast as we get ready to head into 2022. Okay. So the reason I wanted to come out and share this episode is because the purpose and the premise of this show is to show you how to start, launch, and monetize your podcast. So therefore, it just makes sense for me to hone in on two of our three primary pillars of this show. So first things first, when we talk about wanting to start a podcast, this is an idea and this is a concept that a lot of people have. However, after about 6 episodes, they get burnt out or they just lose the desire, and that's called pod fade, right? So understanding that's something that happens all because people don't have this first point. And I'm gonna lay it out today. I'm gonna give it to you in 10 points. You know, I like to lay out the points. So I'm gonna get to you in 10 points. The first reason would be they're not clear on their message. I want you to get clear on your message, my friend. What do you want this podcast to do for you? Do you want it to create awareness? Do you want it to give you authority in a subject? Do you want it to ultimately be a mission, right? You want to do 10 episodes and that's all you want to do because the mission of the platform is ultimately to get out certain content and you cover that in those 10 episodes and then you let it be. But we have to get clear on what our message is. We have to get clear on what people are going to see and then how they're going to identify the brand, what they're going to see, and then ultimately what they're going to take away from the platform. Okay. So the first thing is we have to get clear on the message. What do we want this podcast to do? The second thing we have to consider is getting clear on our market. Like I've said many times before, I had the Speak Your Success podcast. I was clear on the message. I was providing tangible self-help strategies for millennials who were in that transition space of post-college, right? I was clear on my audience, but that audience wasn't going to pay. So when we talk about identifying the market, you want to then take a step back and look and say, who is going to pay me? Or who can bring me in to pay me to solve this problem? Who can pay me to talk to millennials? At that time, I didn't have the presence of mind to know that I could begin to speak to staffs. I can begin to speak to corporate. I can begin to speak to places where they hire millennials. I didn't know that then. I know that now. Maybe you're somebody who has a podcast that's focused on real estate. You can speak at real estate conferences. You can put together a real estate course. You can be a mobile notary, right? So we want to think about this when it comes to talking about our market, because the market is where the money is, all right? But then, I've once heard it said before that if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. So understanding that we have to have a plan on when this thing is going to come out. For my first three podcasts, I didn't necessarily launch them. I made an announcement, but I didn't put a launch plan in place. I didn't have a launch strategy. For your podcast mentor show with Jonathan Jones, I launched this podcast, right? I put it out there. I let people know where they can find it. And then it ultimately led to me getting 3 times the download. So I ultimately increased my downloads by 300% from my previous shows. So why am I telling you that? Because I want you to select the launch date. Select the launch date and then stick to it. If you tell people that your podcast is releasing on January 1st, then it better be available on January 1st. People better be able to go into the Apple podcast and search and find it. In Spotify, search and find it. Stay true to the launch date, because by having a launch date, now you're creating a different level of momentum, and people are coming to you. People are listening. People are looking to hear from you because you have momentum around this announcement. People are going to get excited. But if you start with one date and then you change the date and you try to come back and do something different, then people aren't going to want to listen. They're going to shift. They're going to move around. They'll say, you said you're released on the 1st. Now it's the 15th. Now it's the 30th. I'm not interested anymore. And the momentum is going to dwindle right before your eyes. So you definitely want to get that in place. Okay. So once you've identified a date for the launch, once you've identified and got clear on your message, and then once you know who your market is, then you want to record your trailer EP. Think about every time that you've seen or heard of a new movie coming out. They put out a trailer. For the new NBA season this year, they put out a trailer. It was a commercial talking about the NBA and how they're celebrating 75 years of basketball. The WNBA, they put out a trailer for their season as well. Why do you want to put out a trailer? Because a trailer creates hype. A trailer gives something for people to begin to share. So before we put out the trailer, we have to record the trailer. Okay, so you want to record the trailer episode, tell people a little bit about your show, tell people who you are, tell people what the message of your show is, and then let people know who's the market. Hey, this is your podcast mentor show. It's geared towards speakers, coaches, and consultants who are looking to elevate their authority. We're going to be releasing episodes every Monday and every Thursday. So make sure that you tune in, and we're going to cover everything that talks about how to start, how to launch, and how to monetize your podcast. We're going to be releasing January 1st, 2022. Be sure to be tuned in to catch that first episode and subscribe or follow the podcast so you don't miss any updates. That right there is a quick run through of what you can cover in your trailer episode to let people know who you're talking to let people know what your message is, to let people know how often you're releasing episodes, and then also helping them understand what is the focus of your show. Okay. Want to get those things covered, want to get those things addressed. Let's keep this thing moving. After you record the trailer, then you want to record your first episode, right? Want to get the first episode in the can. And I suggest that you break down, like how I said, is focus on start, launch, and monetize with this podcast. Focus on one of those areas and then do an episode. Let people know one facet of your message. Let people know one piece of what you're going to be covering and then begin to unpack that, right? Why do we want to do this in the first episode? Because we want to bring them in slow. We want to build them up slow. So make sure that we address that right there. Then they're like, oh, I'm in the right place. Okay. I'm in the right place. So we get the first episode recorded. Okay. And then after we got the trailer recorded, after we got the first episode recorded, then we can take a step back and then we can begin to write out our podcast description. John, why do we want to write out a podcast description? For one, our podcast description should be a spinoff from our trailer episode. So we can take that same information, maybe do a few tweaks here and there, and then add just a few more sentences. And then we have our podcast description. Why is this so helpful? Because some people are going to just click on your show based on the trailer, right? They're going to say, I like the trailer. Let me hear more. Some people are going to click on your show based on your cover art, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But others might be the kind that like to read. So they're going to read the description. They're going to see what you have in there. And then from them seeing, they're like, oh, I'm in the right place. Okay. I like what they're saying. Okay. They're dropping episodes. Okay. Once a week. Okay. Every Monday. Great. Great. This is going to be perfect for me heading to work. So you're affirming, or you're reiterating to people that they're in the right place. Then after we do that, we get our message, we get our market, we get the trailer recorded, we got the launch date. And now it gets really exciting because you get to the place to where you start to finalize the artwork. So your artwork should be inspired based on your market, based on your message, based on the way that you want to put this thing out into the media. So we want to finalize our artwork. You might know somebody who's a graphic designer, right? You might go and create it yourself on like Canva. You might even go on Fiverr, reach out, get somebody to design a cover art for you. But ultimately, finalizing your cover art, I would say don't get too married to it starting out, because the cover art is going to evolve over time. I would suggest that you start off creating it on Canva for free, and then you go and then you pay somebody later down the line to upgrade it and to update it. That's what I did. You start where you're at with the budget that you can afford. And then from that point, then you begin to move on, because this is going to be something that you're going to put out. But eventually there's tweaks that's going to be made. As you begin to come more into your brand, you're going to edit the colors. You're going to tweak the fonts. But this is mainly for us to make an announcement about the podcast being live. Okay. Mainly for the announcement about the podcast being live. And then we put it out, boom. And then we get to number 8, where you launch with your first 3 episodes. John, you told me to record 1 episode. Now you're talking about launching with 3. That's why to start out, I showed you that the focus of my show is to start, launch, and monetize the podcast. So that gives me 3 areas to start. I can talk about how to start your podcast, 1 episode. I can talk about how to launch your podcast, another episode. And then I can talk about how to monetize your podcast. That's 3 episodes right there. So if you're following the framework I laid out for you, now you have the ability to boom, 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 hit those 3 points, hit those 3 points. And that's 3 episodes right there. But the trailer, I like to consider as episode 00. So that's 1. Then we come and do the next episode, which is episode 01. Then we come with episode 02. So in all honesty, you only need to record, right? The trailer is 00, then episode 01, then episode 02. So that's 3 right there with the trailer, and then 2 episodes. Okay. So that's how we get set up to launch with our first 3 right there. And then after you roll it out like that, then you want to submit it. Okay. Because one of the biggest things that podcasters struggle with is getting their podcast out to the most amount of people possible. And the way that happens is we want to submit our podcasts to directories. The first way that starts is we have to put our podcast on a host provider. Okay. So after we record the episodes, then we want to upload them into a host provider. I suggest PodPal. I'm going to have everything that I've talked about down in the show notes below, so you can click the link and get access to all of those things. But I suggest PodPal because that's who I rock with. And just the way that they organize everything, it makes it a simplified process. So once we upload it on PodPal, Then you go to where it says submit to other directories. And then you're literally copying your RSS feed, which every host provider will provide for you. You copy that, and then you go over and then you submit it to Spotify. You submit it to Apple. You submit it to iHeart. So it's literally copying the RSS and then going to those sites. You can Google submit my podcast to Spotify. You can, I won't even make you do that. I'm just going to put the link down below to where you click the link and then it'll take you to where you can submit your podcast to Spotify, to where you can submit it to Apple, and then where you can submit it to iHeart as well, just to make it easy for you. Okay. So we did all those things. And then after we do that, then we want to record episode number 3. John, why do we want to record episode number 3? Because we want to have another episode ready in the can to release for the following week. Okay, for the following week. All right. So I wanted to lay this out for you today. And just as I talked about getting clear on your market, I have another video that I've done on that, ultimately on how you secure your niche. So I'm going to link that. Then we also talked about creating your podcast cover art. I have another video that I did on that. So I'm going to link that as well to where I really break that down. I really dive in. But ultimately, family, I want to break this down and show this to you because, like I said before, I'm seeing people putting out episodes, putting out content, putting out podcasts to where they can be really capitalizing at a high level, but they're missing the mark on some of it. So I want to come in and give you an episode. So if you enjoyed this episode and you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and make sure to hit the notification bell so you get notified every time I drop new content, I drop new episodes. And we're going to start revving it up on how-to videos. I'm going to start giving you all some more how-to videos so that you can benefit from that content as well. But last but not least, let me do a quick recap. But before we do that, I want to let you know that you can connect with me on Instagram at Jonathan Jones Speaks. Just Jonathan Jones Speaks on Instagram. Connect with me. And also, now it's time for us to do the recap. Okay. So we talked about the best way to start a podcast in 2022 in this here episode. So the first thing I said you have to do is you got to get clear on your message, right? What do you want people to take away? What are you striving for this podcast to do for you? The second thing is, who are you talking to? You got to get clear on your market. And as I said before, I have a video on niching down. We're going to link that in the show notes. Then you have to select a launch date, right? Jordans are launched. Movies are launched. Major promotions are rolled out by way of a launch. You starting your podcast is a major promotion. So act like it. All right. Then we got to record the trailer episode. You have to record the trailer episode because you want to give people that sizzle. You want to give something to get the people excited about. All right. Then we got to record the first episode. Got to record the first episode. I didn't say release it yet. I just said record it because we want to sit on this for a second before we really roll that thing out. And then we have to write a podcast description to let people know that they're in the right place. If they don't know that they're in the right place, then they won't come back. So we got to make sure they know that. You got to finalize your artwork based on, your description, based on who's your message for, based on who's your market. You want to put together a cover art in that way. I said I'm going to share with you another video that's going to give you more in-depth look at that on the page. And then we launch with 3 episodes, 00, 01, and 02. And the reason we do this is because we want to make sure that people hear our content. They're like, I like episode 00. I like that trailer. Then they're like, oh, what's episode number 1? Oh, what's episode number 2? Oh, I'm in the right place. Let me subscribe and let me follow the podcast. And then You want to submit it to all the directories. The way that we get more listenership is ultimately by putting ourselves where the listeners are. So Apple, Spotify, iHeart, etc. You want to be on these platforms, on these streaming providers, just to make sure that more people hear you and then more people can get the message. And then the number 10, you want to record episode number 3. So we got 00 out, 01 out, 02. You want to record episode 3 so that you're ready for the next week ahead. So understanding all of that, friends, thank you for taking the time to rock out with me today on the Your Podcast Mentor Show, because the focus of this show is ultimately to help you establish your platform so that you can profit on purpose from your podcast. All right, family, until next time. Okay, until next time. For one, if you have any questions, go to yourpodcastmentorshow.com. Scroll down to the bottom, hit that mic, and then leave me a voicemail. And then you can get the opportunity to have your question featured on the Q&A with JJ segment. All right, family, until next time, it's your podcast mentor, Jonathan Jones. Peace and God bless.